In a world where we pride ourselves on progress and equality, the ugly specter of racial discrimination continues to haunt our society, manifesting in unexpected places, even in the supposedly refined cabins of first-class air travel. For people of color, the simple act of boarding an airplane can become a humiliating exercise in having to repeatedly prove they belong in spaces reserved for privilege. This is the story of one such incident, a confrontation that would ultimately expose the systemic prejudice lurking beneath a veneer of corporate hospitality. The first-class cabin of Pinnacle Airways Flight 653 gleamed with luxury, wide leather seats and rich mahogany accents, attentive flight attendants serving pre-departure champagne. As Maya stepped aboard, flight attendant Sandra Miller looked up, her practiced smile freezing slightly at the sight of the casually dressed woman of color. "Good morning," Maya said warmly, glancing at her boarding pass. "Seat A4 by the window." Sandra's perfectly penciled eyebrows arched slightly. "First class is to your left," she said, her tone carrying a hint of doubt. She stowed her backpack in the overhead compartment and settled into her seat, pulling out a dog-eared paperback rather than the latest electronic device. "Excuse me." A male flight attendant named Thomas appeared at her side, his voice low but firm. "May I see your boarding pass?" Maya looked up, meeting his skeptical gaze. "Of course." She pulled up the digital pass on her phone again. Thomas scrutinized it longer than necessary, glancing between the screen and Maya's casual attire and brown skin. "One moment, please." She watched as he conferred with Sandra near the front of the cabin, both stealing glances in her direction. The businessman across the aisle pretended not to notice, but his attention was obvious. Maya took a deep breath, recognizing the familiar signs of discrimination forming. Sandra approached, now accompanied by the lead flight attendant, Elizabeth, whose name badge indicated her supervisory status. "Ma'am," Elizabeth began, her voice professionally modulated but cool. "There seems to be some confusion with your boarding pass." Maya set her book down. "There's no confusion. I'm in seat A4, first class." Elizabeth's smile tightened. "Our system occasionally makes errors. This is a first-class cabin, and you don't think I belong here," Maya finished, her voice calm but direct. "Is that what you're suggesting?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Elizabeth's face. "Not at all. We simply need to verify." "You've already verified my boarding pass twice," Maya pointed out. "It clearly shows I'm assigned to this seat." By now, the other first-class passengers were watching the exchange with undisguised interest. Thomas stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression suggesting he'd encountered this situation before and knew how it would end. "Perhaps you were upgraded accidentally," Sandra suggested, her tone making it clear how unlikely she considered this possibility. "Perhaps I purchased a first-class ticket," Maya countered. "Is there a dress code for this cabin that I'm unaware of?" Elizabeth's professional veneer slipped just slightly. "No official dress code, but our first-class passengers typically present themselves in a manner that reflects the premium experience." "I see." Maya's voice remained steady. "So it's not about the ticket I purchased, but rather how I look." A distinguished older white gentleman across the aisle cleared his throat. "I've flown in sweatpants in first class many times. No one's ever questioned my right to be here." Elizabeth flushed. "Sir, this is between our staff and the passenger." "It shouldn't be happening at all," he replied, but then returned to his newspaper. Sandra leaned closer to Elizabeth, whispering something. Elizabeth nodded and turned back to Maya. "Ma'am, we have a full flight today, and we need to ensure all passengers are in their correct assigned seats. Our system shows this seat should be occupied by an M. Chaudhry." "That's correct." "Maya Chaudhry, do you have identification to verify that?" Thomas asked, his tone suggesting he'd caught her in a lie. Maya maintained her composure, though her patience was wearing thin. "You've never asked any other passenger to prove their identity after boarding. The gate agent verified my boarding pass." "It's standard procedure when there are discrepancies," Elizabeth insisted. "What discrepancies? Besides the fact that I'm not white and not dressed the way you think I should be?" The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman whispered to her companion, loud enough for Maya to hear. If she bought the ticket, what's the problem? Elizabeth's expression hardened. Ma'am, if you cannot verify your identity, we'll need to reassign you to an economy seat. Maya sat straighter. I can verify my identity, but I shouldn't have to. No one else in this cabin has been asked to do so. Ms. Chaudhry, if that's who you are, Thomas said with barely concealed condescension, we're simply following protocol. No, Maya replied firmly. You're following your biases. If I were white and wearing pearls and a designer outfit, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Elizabeth's professional smile vanished entirely. This is becoming disruptive. Either show identification or we'll need to move you to economy class. Maya noticed the other passengers watching, some with sympathy, others with detached amusement, the daily theater of racial profiling unfolding before them. She could end this instantly by revealing who her husband was, but that wasn't how Maya navigated the world. She had never used Raj's name to gain advantages or special treatment. This is discrimination, Maya stated clearly. I purchased this ticket like everyone else. Ma'am? Elizabeth's voice turned frosty. We need to complete boarding. Your options are to verify your identity, move to economy, or deplane. The injustice of the situation burned, but Maya recognized the impossible position. Making a scene would only delay the flight for everyone. Fine, she said finally. I'll move, but I want your names and employee numbers. This isn't over. Thomas smirked slightly. We'll find you a seat in economy and provide compensation for the fare difference. I don't want compensation, Maya replied, gathering her backpack. I want accountability. As she stood, she noticed the sympathetic glances from a few passengers, while others studiously avoided eye contact. The older gentleman who had spoken up earlier shook his head in disgust. With an escort that felt more like an expulsion, Sandra led Maya through the premium cabin toward economy. Passengers in business class watched curiously as she passed, the hushed whispers following in her wake. Maya held her head high, refusing to show how deeply the humiliation cut. Here you are, Sandra said, gesturing to a middle seat in economy. We apologize for any inconvenience. Maya looked her directly in the eyes. No, you don't. But you might soon enough. The following morning dawned bright over the Pinnacle Airways corporate headquarters in Manhattan. The glass and steel building reflected the city skyline, an architectural statement of the company's premium position in the airline industry. In the executive suite, Chief Customer Officer Victoria Palmer reviewed the day's agenda with growing anxiety. The quarterly customer experience review was scheduled for 10 a.m., and the numbers weren't promising. Passenger complaints had increased by 11% over the previous quarter, with issues regarding staff attitude topping the list. The board members will be attending, her assistant reminded her, and Mr. Chaudhry has confirmed he'll be joining in person rather than virtually. Victoria's stomach tightened. Raj Chaudhry had acquired Pinnacle Airways 9 months ago, but today would mark his first appearance at a quarterly review. His reputation for demanding excellence was legendary, as was his limited tolerance for excuses. Make sure Elizabeth Winters and her first-class cabin crew are here, Victoria instructed. They've maintained the highest customer satisfaction scores, and we need some positive examples to highlight. Meanwhile, across town, Raj Chaudhry adjusted his tie in the mirror of their spacious penthouse. At 38, he carried himself with the natural authority of someone accustomed to success. His tailored navy suit and crisp white shirt projected power without ostentation. "Are you sure you don't want me to say something directly to the flight attendants?" he asked, watching Maya's reflection as she sat on the edge of their bed. Maya shook her head. "This isn't about personal revenge, Raj. It's about changing a culture." "They humiliated my wife," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "That's pretty personal to me." Maya stood and straightened his tie, though it needed no adjustment. "And I love you for that. But this is bigger than me or those 3 crew members. This is about a system that judges people based on race and appearances rather than character." Raj's expression softened as he looked at his wife. Maya had maintained her groundedness despite the wealth that surrounded her now. It was one of the countless reasons he'd fallen in love with her. She saw the world without the distortion of privilege. "All right," he agreed. "We'll do it your way." He checked his watch. "The meeting starts in an hour. You're sure about the timing?" Maya nodded. "Absolutely sure, and I'll be wearing exactly what I wore yesterday." At Pinnacle Airways headquarters, the executive conference room filled with board members, department heads, and key staff. Elizabeth Winters, along with Thomas and Sandra from the first-class cabin crew, sat together near the back. They had been surprised by the invitation to attend such a high-level meeting, but assumed it was related to their consistently high performance metrics. "Maybe they're finally creating that elite service team they've been discussing," Thomas whispered to Sandra. "We'd be the obvious choice to lead it." Sandra nodded, smoothing her perfectly pressed uniform. "I heard the new owner is actually attending. This could be a big opportunity." Elizabeth shushed them as Victoria Palmer called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for being here today," Victoria began. "As you know, customer experience is the cornerstone of our brand promise at Pinnacle Airways. Today, we'll be reviewing our quarterly performance metrics and discussing strategies for improvement." The room quieted as the door opened, and Raj Chaudhry entered. Tall and commanding, he carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from building a tech empire from the ground up. "Mr. Chaudhry," Victoria said, "we're honored to have you join us today." Raj nodded and took a seat at the head of the table. "Please continue." The presentation began with slides showing various metrics and charts. Victoria highlighted the positive aspects while carefully framing the areas of concern. Raj listened without expression, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. "Now, I'd like to call attention to our bright spots," Victoria said, her voice gaining enthusiasm. "Our first-class service on transcontinental routes has maintained a 92% satisfaction rating, well above industry average. We have members of that team here today." She gestured toward Elizabeth, Thomas, and Sandra. Raj looked at them for the first time, his gaze revealing nothing. "In fact," Victoria continued, "I've asked Elizabeth Winters, our senior first-class cabin manager, to share some insights about their approach to premium customer service." Elizabeth stood confidently and moved to the front of the room. "Thank you, Victoria. At Pinnacle Airways, we believe the first-class experience begins the moment our passengers step on board. We're trained to recognize and accommodate the needs of our premium travelers who expect and deserve a certain level of service." The door to the conference room opened quietly. "We carefully attend to every detail," Elizabeth continued, not noticing the new arrival. "From the way we address our passengers to ensuring that the first-class cabin maintains its exclusive atmosphere." Her words faltered as she noticed Raj Chaudhry's attention had shifted. Elizabeth turned to see what had interrupted her presentation. There, standing just inside the doorway, was the woman in the dark gray sweatsuit and black cap from yesterday's flight. For a moment, Elizabeth didn't process what she was seeing. Then recognition dawned, followed swiftly by confusion. Thomas and Sandra exchanged alarmed glances as they, too, recognized yesterday's misplaced passenger. Raj Chaudhry stood. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "I believe some of you have already met my wife, Maya Chaudhry." The conference room froze in a tableau of shock and dawning horror. Elizabeth stood at the presentation podium, her professional composure cracking like thin ice. Thomas and Sandra seemed to physically shrink in their seats, their faces draining of color. Around the table, executives and board members looked between Raj, Maya, and the flight attendants, trying to piece together the unfolding drama. "Your wife?" Victoria Palmer finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Raj confirmed, his tone deceptively casual. "Maya flew from Newark to San Francisco yesterday on our airline, in first class." Each phrase fell like a hammer. Maya moved to stand beside her husband, still dressed in the exact outfit that had deemed her unworthy of a seat she'd paid for. The silver bangle on her wrist caught the light, the only hint of luxury on her person. "Perhaps," Raj suggested, Elizabeth was about to explain Pinnacle Airline's approach to recognizing premium travelers. "Please continue." Elizabeth's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. Her carefully constructed presentation about first-class service excellence now lay in ruins at her feet. Sandra stared fixedly at the table, while Thomas's earlier smirk had transformed into an expression of pure dread. There must have been a misunderstanding, Elizabeth finally stammered. A misunderstanding, Raj repeated thoughtfully. Interesting choice of words. Maya, would you characterize yesterday's incident as a misunderstanding? Maya stepped forward. Unlike her husband, whose controlled anger simmered beneath a professional exterior, she projected calm purpose. What happened yesterday wasn't a misunderstanding, she said, her voice clear enough to reach every corner of the silent room. It was racial bias in action. I was judged not by my boarding pass, which was checked multiple times, but by my appearance and ethnicity. You decided I didn't belong in first class because I didn't match your image of who deserves to be there. You questioned my identity, something you did for no other passenger. You threatened me with removal from the flight, and ultimately you humiliated me by marching me back to economy class in front of a full plane of onlookers. A board member cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Chaudhry, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Raj interrupted firmly. This is precisely what this customer experience meeting should address. But let's be clear, I'm not here as an angry husband, though I certainly am one. His gaze swept the room. I'm here as the owner of this airline, deeply concerned about a culture that judges people based on race and appearances rather than treating all customers with respect. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a gesture that commanded attention. The irony that my wife was removed from first class on an airline that I own is not lost on me. But this isn't about ownership or status. It's about basic human dignity. If Maya were white, would she have been treated this way? If she had been wearing expensive clothes instead of comfortable travel attire, would her identity have been questioned 3 times? Victoria Palmer's face had gone pale. Mr. Chaudhry, I assure you this does not reflect our company values. Doesn't it? Maya interjected quietly. When your staff profiles passengers based on race and appearance, when they humiliate paying customers because they don't fit a certain image, that seems very much like your company values in practice, if not in policy. The room fell silent again.